Hi guys, welcome to Foshty. Today I am, as always, I'm Zaya Felix, but today I am here and I am interviewing my friend Muyiwa.
That's right.
What's the full name?
Olaosun.
Olaosun. And what does that mean?
So Muyiwa means God brought this child.
Okay, alright, because I know Olum generally, but I don't really know the rest of it. Okay, cool. Thank you for joining us on Foshty.
Sure.
Really appreciate you taking the time to be here. As you may or may not know, we just talk to young African immigrants, usually first generation American or just, coming from Nigeria or wherever. And we just really want to talk about your experiences, your opinions, what you do, how you view things, raising children, marriage life. So really it's an open forum for a general conversation.
That's
but
right.
I do try to start with the question about home.
Okay.
Where do you call home?
All right. So for me, home is here in Houston for now, right?
Okay.
So home is here in Houston. I've lived in Houston for 7 years full time.
Okay.
So I lived in Houston for 7 years full time. I've moved around the U.S. quite a bit, but I moved into the U.S. when I was 23 years old, right?
Okay.
Moved into the U.S. at 23, so obviously I spent a chunk of my life in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, right.
So came here for graduate school, graduated, moved out to the West Coast, came back down south, and since then I've been around the Gulf Coast, right? Well, then work has actually taken me all over the world, in between then and now.
And now, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Houston is home. This is the home base. Where are your parents? Are they here?
So
or are they
my parents are in Nigeria.
They're in Nigeria,
Yeah,
okay.
always
So-
been.
Okay. How often do you go back to Nigeria?
So right now, because I work in Nigeria right now,
Okay.
so I sort of
Like-
spend half my time in Nigeria,
And
half my
half
time
okay.
here. So I go to Nigeria every month.
Okay. So does Nigeria, and I'm asking because you say home is here, and of course I get it, this is where you are, but does Nigeria feel, having been here for so long and sort of gone through your experiences of growing up and finishing school, does Nigeria feel like home or does it feel foreign when you're there?
Very much like home. So it's an interesting question you asked, right? Because over the last couple of years, I want to say that I've spent more time traveling Nigeria than I did when I was growing up, all my 23 years growing up in Nigeria. I've met a diversity of people, different experiences, different experiences in several different things, culinary experiences, cultural experiences. So I would say that I've learned so much more about Nigeria and maybe even Africa in general, right? So
just a lot more exposure, I guess.
it is a whole lot more exposure. So right now, everywhere in the world, it's interesting to say this, but in the last 3 years, I actually feel more African than I felt all my life, right?
Okay. Why? Because you've gotten more exposure and you've traveled to more places, or?
I think it's because of that. And it's always about the people, right? So, this year I've been to probably 5 African countries.
Oh wow!
Right? And
because most people don't always get that, especially with growing up. You don't really get to.
I didn't go to a single one.
Right. I still haven't been to another African country.
It is interesting.
Which is very interesting because I've been to almost, a lot of other places.
Yeah.
So those travels, were they intentional or were they work related, or do you find yourself?
Some were work related. Most of the others were, I think I went for a wedding once in East Africa. Okay. So, but it's interesting how very similar we are in Africa. Now when I meet other Africans here in the U.S., I'm able to actually relate better. It's more like a pride. Africa is more like a pride thing for me now than it was, say, 4 years ago. Right.
That's pretty good. I mean, that's awesome that you get to experience that as an adult. Question is, why do you think we don't explore Africa more? I mean, growing up, I feel like we're all in our little silos, and now as an adult, you can see that there's a lot more similarity than even you were aware.
Okay.
Why do you think we, being Nigerians or people that are growing up at home, I grew up at home as well, why do you think we don't explore other African countries?
So I think the most important reason is economic, right? Okay. So a whole lot of us grew up, we weren't born with silver spoons in our mouth, right? So a lot of us grew up with what we had. And, I grew up in the southwest of Nigeria, and the only time I ever went couple of times. I was lucky because I had brothers, you know, I'm the last of 4 boys, right? So I had brothers that went around the country to work. So I would visit them whenever we had holidays in school, right? So I went up to the north for my NYSC, and that was quite an interesting experience as well. But then I would say that most people grew up in a region, like most people you talk to that grew up in Lagos probably never left Lagos. If they did, they go to a place called Ibadan when they never explored.
They explored other parts of the country, much less.
Exactly. Now, another big reason obviously is, you know, there isn't a whole lot of trade, like free trade flow across Africa. You know, I mean, you talk to someone that's born in Texas, you know, along the Gulf Coast, you know, there's a whole lot of interaction between people. There's a lot of business that's being conducted, you know. There's a lot of companies with activities in other places.
Other parts of the world and other places.
Africa is not like that.
Right.
You know, Africa is a place where, you know, just existing, you know, it's an adventure. You know, just being alive and getting a job and, you know, being able to put food on your family's table itself is a blessing. Yeah,
that's an interesting perspective because I never really think about it that way, but that's something where we sort of provide what we need, especially in the smaller units, and then you import whatever it is that you don't have access to. And that's it, and it's provided within country, so you're not really looking for opportunities. Most people aren't. I mean, of course, once in a while you hear of traders who go to Ghana or Benin Republic or something, but not as a common thing, going up and exploring. Interesting. Okay, so now that home is here, and I know you have kids, and do you have desires to have them explore Africa? Have you taken them back to Nigeria? How does that, their future, I guess, and your experience with Africa and Nigeria, how exactly do you intend to, if you've thought about it, to balance that? So I mean, it's an interesting question as a parent. Obviously, it's something you think about every day, right? I think for me, what will make me proudest is, you know, to grow up, or I'm grown, you know, just to continue growing. You know, we're not quite there yet. See my kids grow up with so much exposure and diversity, you know, and understand the need for inclusiveness in the world. Right? So I've been very lucky, you know, I've been very blessed in my career, right? So I would say that in the last 10 years I've traveled to about 40 countries, you know, and that helps me a lot. You know, that helps me. You know, I meet someone that's Danish, you know, I've been to his country, you know, and you don't even necessarily have to have gone there, you know, to be able to relate to them, you know. So half the time I'm traveling, you know, I sort of put on different lenses and I'm like, it would be so cool for Demilade, that's my first daughter, to see this, you know. What would she think about this, you know, instead of walking into a store in the U.S. and saying, I want this, and that, and they get it all the time, you know. You know, it's interesting. You know, one of the things that I do is I helped found a farm in Nigeria, right? And I go there a lot, and you know, there's this kid is 13 years old, right? And he has some developmental challenges, you know, so you meet him and then you think he's 5 years old, right? You know, and then I talk to him all the time. He's super intelligent, you know, and you know, you're just like, you know, I really wish my daughter would be here to talk to him, you know, just to engage with him and see that there's different parts, there's different ways to view the world, you know. So that's my biggest, you know, hope and, you know, prayer, if you will, for my kids to grow up with that exposure, and you know, and staying in one place, it's not gonna help. You can't really get that being in your own little box. So I'm going to touch on, you mentioned that you helped found a farm in Nigeria. We'll touch on that, but because that's not your actual job, that's not your day job, and that's something that we've discussed, and I think quite often you find a lot of Nigerians or immigrants really doing multiple things at the same time. It almost seems like we are restless in some way. What was the driving factor, or the driving force to go search or try to develop something relating to agriculture specifically, and then why Nigeria? In terms of investments, because you are here. I mean, essentially you just said this is home, the U.S. is home, your family is here. What was the driving force?
So I think you actually answered that question in a prior statement that you made that we're restless, right?
Okay, so it was restlessness.
So
Yeah.
restlessness is a big part of it, you know,
Okay.
because it didn't have to be Africa, it didn't have to be agriculture. You
Yeah.
know, at times you lean back and think about, you know, why did I even do this? You know, but there is, you know, so there's usually a method to the madness,
Yeah.
right? I think for me it was, you know, I work in the oil and gas industry,
Okay.
right? So it was around 2014, 2015. There was a big slowdown in that industry, you know, and then I started thinking that, hey, you know, I have all these degrees, you know, I have this exposure, you know, and I see opportunity in the world. I see opportunity, especially in Africa, right? Africa, the West has transitioned from a place of, you know, we don't know how to make a specific product to a place where, you know, there's so much competition. I very often use this analogy between a Samsung Galaxy phone and an iPhone, right? So with every new generation of phone, you see that, you know, it's cosmetic differences.
Right.
It's like,
it's very subtle.
I bought an iPhone XS Max in March, and then in September there's another phone. What's different? You know, whether the home button placement. You know, it's like
it's very subtle.
It's very
difference that
subtle,
really
and
make
those
a
are the
difference.
things that differentiate this product.
Right.
There's so much competition on the basis of this. But in Africa,
Yeah.
it's not like that. It's not even close. In Africa, we don't know how to make the product.
No,
The
that's
market
true.
is huge.
Yeah.
You know, it's unbelievably big, but
Yeah.
we don't know how to make the product. You know, I tell people that on the farm, you know, we can sell off our produce within 1 week. You know,
Yeah.
and it's unthinkable in a country like the U.S. So,
Right.
you know, I think some of these themes actually helped drive that. You know, first and foremost, helped drive that or crystallize that idea that whatever I was going to do was going to be in Africa.
Okay.
Because at least I know that I can sell.
Right.
If you can sell, you can make money.
Right.
You know, and then I knew that the biggest challenge in front of me was to find out how to make that product. You know, and I felt that the exposure that I had throughout the world, traveling around, you know, in my career,
Right.
would help me be able to ask the right questions, you know,
Okay.
will help me be able to do the right research to arrive at those answers required to make those products, right?
Okay.
So that was what essentially drove Africa to be the location. You know,
Okay.
agriculture on the other
Right.
hand, you know, obviously, you know, when you have, I usually refer to a statement that was made by an ex-ambassador of the U.S. to Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
You cannot develop a hungry country. You know,
Fair-
you really
fair
cannot
enough.
develop a hungry
Right.
country. You know, people have to have
Basic needs met
you know,
first.
for there to be innovation, for there
Right.
to be creativity.
Absolutely.
We're a continent, we're a country that cannot feed itself, right? So for
Fair
me,
point.
it appeared to be the biggest opportunity, you know. So just in a
Absolutely.
nutshell, that's why it was agriculture.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because even as you mentioned that we're not creating things, it is difficult to create something or to think about anything above your basic needs if those aren't completely met just yet. But there's also the disparity of economics, right? Where, yeah, some people can barely really afford to feed themselves in Nigeria, and then some people have the overabundance of everything.
That's right.
And at the same time, they're not necessarily thinking to. Some people may be, and I'm not. I know that could be a huge generalization, but there are some people who have their basic needs met and then some, but they don't always necessarily think to create to help or prosper
That's right.
the community. So there is this concept that we are not, as much as we are a community focused people, as we can say, family-oriented people, but we don't think of the bigger community.
Right.
Would you agree with that statement? And do you think that is something that could potentially change? If so, what would drive it? So now it's 3-layered questions.
Yeah, so we're very much a selfish country. There's no about that. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
You know, we're built to, you know, get all we can it and sit on that can and not share it with people. That's how we're built as Africans. The reason I think for that is because it's hard to get stuff.
Okay.
You know, so whatever it is you get, you know, must be for you and your family.
For you and your family.
So
yeah.
that's that's what you call the survival instinct.
Right.
You know, you hear statements like, Nigeria man who they carry last, last people do. You know,
Right.
you hear things like that.
Right.
It's like, that's the basis. You know, it all comes back to being able to meet the basic needs
Needs
of
of
life.
a
You know, I mean,
person.
look around
Right.
in the U.S., right? One of the cheapest things is food. You know, and that's the reason why you won't see a lot of people on the streets carrying guns and, you know, doing armed robbery, because they can feed their families. You know, you get a job, it's $10 an hour. It's going to be a hard life, right? But with that, you can still
feed yourself.
Feed yourself.
Right.
In Africa, that doesn't exist. So that drives that. You know, I'm looking for the word to use. That instinct to be protective of whatever it is that we have.
That selfishness, I guess, that we're talking about.
Exactly.
So 2 questions that come up as we're talking. Do you think the U.S. is a selfish country?
I think the U.S. Is. That brings me to a conversation that I had yesterday. I think that the biggest difference between growing up here in the U.S. or spending most of your life here and most of your life in Africa is we raise selfish kids in the U.S.
We raise selfish kids in the U.S. Okay, and now there are multiple. Like I have 5 questions at the same time, which is all good. Because we talk about, at least the initial question was our country and the individual, and really this protection of what I have or what we have, and taking care of my family first. I'm not necessarily thinking, and you said, of course, you seek out, you sit on it, and it's for you and your family, and there is no concern for the community.
Right.
And then we juxtapose that with being in a country like America, where you have, I feel like there is more of a sense of community, in the sense of people want to donate, give out, help, but there's also this intense individualism that's here. Right?
That's probably a better way to put it than, you know, than saying that it's, you know, we raise selfish.
Right.
You know, so it's probably it's a more camera friendly way to
politically correct. But I feel like it is a little different.
It is, and you know, Ivan. So let's just flip the script and talk about America a bit, right?
Right.
So I told you that, you know, I recently had this conversation about how, you know, in my opinion, I think the biggest opportunity, you know, with raising kids and, you know, raising people is, you know, we there's a whole lot of focus on individualism in the U.S.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, so you raise kids and you tell them that, hey, you know, it's all about you. You wake them up in the morning, you drop them off at school, you pick them, you know, you take them to whatever extracurricular activities. It's all about you, right? Yeah. You grew up in a perfect. When I was growing up, you know, I don't think there was ever a time when I had like 2 aunties and 3 uncles and like extended family. Now that has its own downsides, you know.
Really?
It does, but then what it helped me understand is that the world did not revolve around
you, right? There was always someone, It
also gave me perspective, you know, that my parents were actually trying to help their parents, you know, who weren't necessarily in the best economic whatever to raise them. And then it taught me that, you know, growing up in that kind of household, you know, I was going to need to do something like that for people. But then if you come to this country, you know, you hear people talk about, you know, not having seen their family for years, you know.
Right, that sense of,
that sense of it's about me, you know, and so when it comes to individual stuff, you know, you can say that regarding the U.S., but then community-wise, it's probably the same in Africa. So it's all, you know, the primordial, you know, human instinct. It's there, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere, but as you can say, as you've just mentioned, the U.S., the basic needs for most people are already covered. And because you're in agriculture, I also wanted to ask if, and this is probably a presumption on my end, but the access to food versus the quality of food, right? Being that you're now in the food creation industry, does the quality of food make it more abundant? Because I imagine the more GMO, you know, genetically modified food you have, the cheaper it is to produce and the more you have, and then everyone has access to it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's quality food. It just means we have access to it. Now, do you think that's something, doesn't always mean it's quality food, if you really, you know, that's where all,
right. But it also doesn't always mean it's not
quality. No, absolutely not. That's why I said it doesn't always mean that it is quality, but that doesn't mean that it's not, but that helps fuel the overabundance of food. And when we talk about a country like Nigeria, and you being in the food industry, is that something that you see that could aid the overabundance or the abundance of food, to provide cheap food? Is that, like, what do you think is the cause of lack of really access to food. If it was cheaper, if we were able to get more genetically modified food and it was cheaper, do you think more people would have access? Or is it just the lack of, there's no money, you don't have it?
So what you said now is what I've said for the last 3 years, you know.
Okay.
If we
I don't even know which one I said. we can
So
see.
it's about GM, right?
Yeah.
If we embrace GM in Africa,
Yeah.
it's going to turn everything around.
Okay.
Right? I mean, think about the challenges we have in agriculture. You know, if you talk about, you know, I mean, and I'm not talking about the, you know, supply chain issues, you know, farm to table issues,
Access
roads,
to
infrastructure,
roads, exactly.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm talking about basic primary production. You know, you have a whole lot of issues with like inputs. You know, you have drought, you have pests, you have you know, weeds. You know, those are things that are not controlled. Those are things that were problems 50 years ago that are still problems today, and it's a bit of a shame because the world moved past this 20, 30 years ago. So we're a continent of what, 1 billion people or even more than that, you know, 2 billion, whatever it is today. And we can embrace technology that's going to help us. You know, technology that really hasn't been proven to be detrimental, right? You know, there's a whole lot of schools of thoughts and philosophies about what GM does or doesn't do. But I think for me, you know, and this is a personal view, food first, you know, especially now, if you can prove, if there's, you know, definite proof that it's harmful to people, then you can say,
let's not do it, right?
Let's not do it, but there's no proof.
Right. So why do you think we're quick to embrace changes in technology with, I mean, I can, you know, cell phone, wireless, whatever, everyone wants a new gadget and all that, but we're not quick to embrace something that can enhance our basic needs in the sense of just genetic modification for food?
Oh, because everybody thinks agriculture is, you know, medieval. Everybody thinks agriculture is something that was invented millions of years ago and hasn't changed a lot, you know. But the answer to your question is whatever we don't understand, we fight. You know, so think about all the PhDs that we have in Nigeria, you know, in engineering, in electronics, and it's easy to understand cell phone technology, right? And we know that we really cannot do without cell phone technology, so it's easier to embrace
to embrace it because you feel you have to.
Exactly.
Right.
But how much cellular biology research goes on in Nigeria? You know, how much DNA research goes on in Nigeria? You know, we don't understand it, and then we begin to fight it, and people try to explain it and try to, you know, but we're just not open-minded enough to embrace those things, right? So I mean, look at the U.S. for example. 30 years ago. Being diagnosed with a stage 2, stage 3 breast cancer, you know, was a death knell in the U.S. 20, 30 years ago. But then, as time went on, you know, a whole lot of influential people, presidents' wives, you know, started getting diagnosed, and a whole lot of money got pumped into the research. What happened? Change the industry around, right? So if you can fund something, you know, you can educate people in it, it's going to change.
Yeah, and the funding of something in education goes back to what we talked about just in terms of the country being more interested in giving for the greater good of others versus giving only for my family or for my unit and what that does. Yeah, so that's interesting point that you brought out. So question, what would be your vision for your business? Yeah, your agriculture business. What would be your vision in 5-10 years? What would you like to make happen? Not just see happen, but what would you like to impact and actually influence?
Right. You know, I think the biggest thing that I really hope we can achieve in 5-10 years is impact, you know.
Within the country, or are we saying beyond?
I'm talking about within the country. First, within the country, you know, because I get this question a lot, like, do you guys export what you make, right? And my answer is, you know, what use is there in exporting what,
if we haven't
even produced enough in the country, right? No matter how much you can get for it going outside of the country, you know. Obviously, every businessman, the ultimate goal is to make money, right? But then, impact, I think, is key in everything that you do, right? And there can be development without, so this is my own philosophy. There can be development without replication. right? So every bright idea is bright, there's a refinery going up in Lagos, and everybody has been talking about it for years, There's a very prominent businessman that does business all around the country, but I think what we've been unsuccessful at is, being able to create what Europe calls the cottage industries, where there's a small town that produces all of its own cheese, all of its own meal, leans a lot on itself. We don't lean on ourselves. We don't build companies and businesses and say, I want to be able to mentor 10, 20 people.
Right.
Teach them how to do this business.
Internal system.
Show them, how to build this kind of businesses, and then send them out, sort of like the disciples, send them out to do that's what develops a country. When you don't do that, again, there's a lot of opportunity in Africa, and then at some point to get so successful that you're like, well, I can keep on being successful on an individual basis, and that's quite frankly what people do, and then they continue to accumulate wealth to the point where they just don't care about the country.
There's not much else. I can always get whatever I need outside of the country, so I don't need to continue to invest
so
in the country.
Impact for me is big. What we're trying to do right now is, we're trying to start trying to start focusing on single unmarried mothers. That are in the society, we're giving them internships, We're trying to set up, facilities to take care of their kids, to educate their kids while they are at work, So we're bringing them together from like neighboring local governments, right? And we're saying that this is what we do. There's a lot of technology that's involved, a whole lot of you don't even have basic primary education, right? Well, you don't need basic primary education to fly a drone.
Right. So
you also don't need basic primary education to drive a tractor, to learn how to drive a tractor. You don't need basic primary education to be an artisan. In fact, that's probably the biggest gap we have as a country. Just building artisans, building skilled, crafted people that can, sew on a straight line. Just skilled people.
Just
in general,
learn skills, and not just education.
And not just education as BSc and stuff. Technical colleges as used to exist 50, 40 years ago in Nigeria. All of them are like dead now. So anyway, going back to what we're doing with these ladies. So what we're doing is bringing them in, teaching them everything that we know.
Related to agriculture.
Just teach them everything. Bring in people, show them that, the world has moved past what we do in Nigeria, And that essentially, what that does in them is it awakens something in them, and then they have a huge desire, to be participants in that industry, So what we're, the next step obviously for us is, we're opening up more land, and then we actually are giving them resources to start up their own farms,
and I think that was going to be my question. What's the plan? Okay.
And remember what I said about replication. If you
Absolutely.
cannot replicate success, it's a waste of time.
Absolutely.
It really is.
Yeah. So with these women, you kind of give them the training, the background, and then is the idea to have their own sort of micro farming situation that can sustain themselves and their community, or to be able to turn that into a thriving business where they're actually providing food for other people.
So we're in a region of the country where there's a lot of land. So land is not a big issue, right? So again, the good thing about the land is it's accessible land, right? So our vision is to start with like 5 or 10 ladies, right? We set them up with 1 or 2 hectares of land is about the average size of a smallholder farmer in Nigeria. We set them up with that, right? And then we give them inputs. We help them start up their farm.
That's pretty nice.
Obviously, at some point, because it's a business, we have to work out the modalities, right? And then help them start that up, and then it becomes their farm. And it's sort of like I'm a spiritual person, right? So it's like the parable of the talents. You have to account for what you've been given, right?
And what you produce from
and what you produce from that, and then you see people doing better than others, and then you entrust them with more, and then they begin to grow their business. And at some point, what we envisage is some people will come and say, hey, instead of this 2 hectares that I'm doing here, I have an opportunity to go elsewhere, and get 10, 20, 50. And I believe that when you begin to create multiplication like that, that's the only way the country can grow.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic idea, fantastic concept too, because not only that, they also get the desire to possibly help other people
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
employ other people.
Yeah.
So you're really creating a ripple effect on other people's lives. That is pretty awesome. So do you see yourself, and I don't know if this is the plan, but do you see yourself at some point making this your focal point for what you want to do, or does that restlessness as an African Nigerian kind of translate where you see yourself this being one of multiple things that you eventually want to, how is the agriculture space a passion in the sense where this is it and I can branch around this, or this is one of,
So for me, I think agriculture is it's a passion,
okay,
right? It's very much a
Did
passion.
you always know that? Or did you kind of fall into it?
I grew
and
into it.
Okay.
I grew
okay.
into it, so I mean, our life, I say that, I'm something I've been thinking.
Yeah,
about
like since I've been a kid, I've had this passion of doing this. No, but that's cool, because
yeah,
go ahead, I don't mean to cut you off.
So honestly, I mean, we used to have a farm in our backyard growing up, and we farmed all sorts of things. You know. That definitely did not make me a stranger to agriculture.
Okay.
But then 10 years ago, I wasn't thinking agriculture.
Right.
So, but for me now, just having had the opportunity the last few years to set this up, watch things grow, see the impact in the immediate community, right? It's helped me desire it more. So to answer your question, like all of us are still trying to figure out what we're going to do when we grow up, right?
Yeah, that is what's the fun part of life.
For me, I think a fair answer to that question would be when it's time to make that decision. To be very clear, because I'm a very serious believer in the fact that you can only grow something to an extent if you don't devote 100% of your attention to it. So it's how desirous are you of continued growth? What's the trade-off? So for me, that's where I am right now.
Okay, all right, that's phenomenal. What would you say to, so let's imagine someone out there is watching, and part of this platform is not only hearing stories and talking about it, but also being able to transfer knowledge and ideas and processes to other people. So there's a young person out there who is curious or interested in really trying to get into agriculture in Nigeria, and they are not based in Nigeria. Do you know of any resources in country or private that you would say, here, this is how you go about it, and this is how you kind of learn to create a path or follow my path, right? Because you've pretty much carved a path for yourself in this space. What information can you transfer, or what advice would you give to someone else who is seeking something similar?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Okay, well,
that is a hard question. No, I mean, it's not because I can't answer it, but I think there's different ways to answer that question. I think if there's a young person that's seeking to do something in agriculture out there, agriculture first and foremost it's not a silver bullet. It's not something that you do and that's going to make you megabucks immediately. And that's where the passion comes in. You look at a lot of agribusiness in Nigeria or even around the world. A lot of people have left before they have a chance to sort of succeed, right? So it's definitely not a silver bullet. So anybody that's out there that thinks there's an opportunity in agriculture, yes, there is an opportunity in agriculture, but it's a slow growing opportunity. It's an opportunity that's going to take time. There's a lot of education that's readily available in places like the U.S., most of Europe, even in a lot of the BRIC countries, and then you think that learning, that technology can easily translate into Nigeria. All you have to do is to export the idea, and then you can, as a result of that, begin to make money in Nigeria. It's not that straightforward. It's not that straightforward. Right. So to your question about is there a resource that people can actually go access, and maybe we don't. This really a lot of it is self-taught. A lot of it is self-taught. But what I would say is, I'm happy. I've actually met a number of people in North America, that are doing the same thing that I'm doing in Nigeria. So just the other day, there's a farm that's about 50 miles away from where we farm, and I found out that, it's owned by a guy that's, he's a PhD in the state of Illinois, He left his job in the U.S. and then he went and started that, and, his partner is a medical doctor here, so there's
so
it's
pockets,
happening. It's happening, there's pockets of us here and there, there's younger people that are driven, and, they feel they can make a difference in Nigeria. So what I would say is this, we're out there in the public domain. Feel free to reach out. I think that collaboration is going to help us. That's what's going to help us grow the country.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And before we close up, I'll make sure I ask you how people can reach out to you or the business to ask any questions. But just following up with the thought of knowing that patience is required, not just financial resources, but patience with just the process. And I guess that also falls in terms of agriculture. You plant a seed, you have to wait for it to germinate and eventually grow. So I imagine with anything, it takes some time. What would you say if there would be one thing that's been your biggest challenge, which you really just getting the idea off the ground? What would that be?
So I think that is what we call organizational capability. You're not a stranger to that word.
Of course.
It's know-how.
Yeah.
It's people understanding what it takes to run mechanized agriculture, right? It's a people challenge.
Getting the resources, the human capital.
It's a human capital. It's a people challenge. It's trying to instill it in the minds of people that agriculture is not a 9 a.m. It's not a 9 to 5 job. It's more like it's a round the clock job. It's the discipline that it takes to get up every morning and do the same thing over and over again. And it's the discipline that it takes to keep doing the same thing that, even though it appears boring, you shouldn't lose your vision of safety while doing it. So that's part of it, and then the second thing is because there's a lot of what I'll call like a carryover assumptions, over the decades, over generations, the project manager of the place that we use, right? The first thing he said is, I know that your old business model is based around getting this yield. It's impossible to do that. I know he told us that he knows for a fact that all the publications around yield possibilities on that level are, they're fictional. That's what people carry around, and it's hard to change that.
To change that if that's what you believe so strongly.
My agronomist believed that until he saw that it could be done.
It could be changed.
Now he's a believer, right? And then how many other people are out there that can become believers? So again, it's a people problem, just in a nutshell.
So how have you been able to deal with that? Like, how did you tackle that? Educating people, getting people from other places. How have you personally been able to deal with that? And then on a larger scale, knowing that sometimes the know-how is, I don't say it's lacking, but it's difficult to come by. How can we as a country, as a people, kind of overcome that? But first question is, how did you overcome that? And what have you done to try to manage that within your business?
So within Aquashoots, what we've done is, we've just tried to educate people.
Okay.
So we
so
do
take
that
time to actually
taking time to, you talk about growing agriculture and it not being a silver bullet. I'm sure that if you take farmers in a region in the U.S. that have sort of the same soil and the same access to the same resources that they have here, right? If you take them into Africa, they probably would do better faster than people that are in Africa. The reason is because they just don't have that mental block that we have, right? So what we do is we essentially understand that it's a process. So the first thing is you understand that it's a process, and then you year one, year two, we're in our third year of operations now, and I would say that we are way much further than I thought that we would be in 3 years. And people are definitely a lot more educated, right? And another way we do that is we actually bring in some experts from outside the country. We have video conferences with groups, and then people see stuff on video. What you see, you can't dispute, And so that's how we have done it as a country. We have to go back to investment. Investments in all sorts of things. You have to invest in infrastructure. You have to invest in education. You have to. Those are the building blocks of any society. If we're serious about impact, if we're serious about developing Nigeria, petty baby steps won't do.
They're not going to do
baby
that.
Steps is not.
We need drastic, giant leaps at this point because we're behind schedule, I guess.
We are behind schedule, right? So that's the only way you can do it.
Okay, thank you for that. It's a very insightful conversation. Taking it home, quite literally.
Sure.
Would you want your kids to be involved in your business in the future? Do you think of, we all talk about legacy, building businesses for our kids or something. Are you of that train of thought where you would like them to eventually, of course they're still pretty young, but do you have that vision? Do you have that thought process? No.
Honestly, I want them to understand what I do,
Okay.
but I want them to do what they want.
What they want to do.
If
Okay.
what they want to do intersects with what I do,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay.
There's already an in-house resident expert in that,
Yeah.
but they don't have to.
They can choose their own path.
Yep.
Do you intend to take them to visit the farm?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
At a young
I love
age,
that.
older? I mean, if you have thought about it, when do you intend to start introducing them to just that?
As soon as possible.
Okay.
The older one is going to be 6 years old.
Yeah.
It will be cool for a 6-year-old to be running around the farm.
Actually,
And then, you do that, and, again, it's all about sustainability. Doing it one time and then making sure the next time she goes, there is no when she's 16 years old,
Right. Some consistency. And
exactly, some
sort of,
consistency, and then, that helps, when you see the walls,
Yeah.
it helps you make up your mind. It helps you grow up quickly.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
all
that's
right,
true.
I've seen that I saw that in Kenya, I saw that in Uganda, I'm seeing this in Nigeria, I want to do that. It's an interesting perspective. I think I've met more Americans, in the last 1 or 2 years that want to go to school abroad than I did previously.
Yeah.
Than I did previously, and the reason is because people are getting more exposed that there's a bigger and a better world out there, and it's not all about the U.S. Right? So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that also goes. I mean, just with that train of thought and that conversation, I've met a few more, seen more Americans moving their families abroad. Like, not necessarily in an expat capacity, but choosing and waking up to say, you know what, I think there's a different option, and I'm going to go to Asia, I'm going to go to South America, I'm going to just try something different than what we've been taught. Yeah, the future will be a little different when we think about that.
It will be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So talk about future and kids. Do you find yourself sometimes find it difficult in some ways trying to balance your culture and experience being Nigerian, having grown up and actually gone to college and school in Nigeria, and raising American kids, right? I mean,
all the time. All the time.
What would be, and actually we can add another layer, raising American kids and then having to go home and still see your parents who are still very Nigerian.
Right.
So now you are sort of this bridge person, right? The bridge immigrant who gets to balance it out.
Right.
What have you, I mean, your parents come out here to see your kids, so they get to interact. What would you say is sort of the biggest, not challenge, but just a hard, tough differences and things that you find yourself trying to balance, and how you would do things differently if you can, being that your kids will be Nigerian American?
I think for me, what I try to do is, I try to take a step back from, both cultures.
Okay.
Right?
Both
Cultures, actually, and say that, it's about as an individual, right? It's about taking the best of both worlds.
Right.
And trying to incorporate a lot of those good practices into yourself, right? There are things. I mean, you're an African immigrant as well, So there are things that about Nigeria that you're like, just thinking about them, you shake your head.
Yeah.
Right? There are other things that and you're like, those are things we should be trying to invite in kids in,
right.
or that kids should be trying to invite here, right?
Right.
So it's about taking the best of both worlds, and trying to build a life around that, right?
Yeah.
It is hard, and then, I guess the other half of that is expectations, right?
Of course.
Because I grew up a certain way, I expect my children to be that way.
Right.
No matter how hard you enforce some things, I mean, if you're not a peer, you'll never be a peer, right? No matter how genetically
and the
modified you
experiences
are.
you've had will not be the same experiences they have.
Because
so that shaping is
that's what
different.
shapes you. Your experiences are what shapes you. It's not the one-time instruction.
Of
like
course.
I'll give you an example. There's quite a common example in Africa. Your parent, your father is trying to tell you to do something as a kid, and then you're not getting it quite as fast as he wants you to get it, and then he yells at you, and you get it.
Yeah.
You get it, and then right, and
even if you have to fake getting it, but you get it.
Exactly, you get it.
I
And then I talk to my daughter. I'm like, go put that cup down. And she's taking her time to put it down. Why? And I'm like, Danny, go put that cup down. And she's like, Daddy, stop yelling at me.
Yeah.
And then, I laugh. I'm like, if you know what yelling is,
like,
right. What would happen is that you'll actually drop that cup if I had yelled at you. But anyway.
Yeah, that is a real thing. My son will literally say, my ear hurts. You're making my ear hurt. I'm like, I haven't even yelled. Like, this is not yelling. This is me just saying, go do it. And you tell me your ear hurts. What does that mean? Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely, it's an interesting thing being in the bridge where you have to kind of manage both ends.
And then, but for the question you asked about my parents, just going back there, and still trying to be, that good African kid that was raised and all that, it's again about being able to understand expectations and, parents are parents, they're mostly set in their ways, when you are growing up and you're becoming, you're approaching that age to where you understand that, being able to meet expectations is necessarily not a bad thing.
So, you just kind of indulge them sometimes.
Go with the flow, indulge them sometimes, but it's fun. It's fun, and they understand it.
Right, because they know you're different too.
They
recognize that you're different, and they may not understand it, but they recognize it. Absolutely. And it's just like they have to learn to adjust. I'm sure when they meet your kids, like, oh my God, these children, like this is different, right? So it's always that constant balancing. But that's the part we get to play, being in the middle.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. We're about to wrap up, so thank you for joining us. And as I mentioned, you may have the option to ask me a question because most of this is focused on you and your experience and your business. So if you have a question for me, I will happily oblige.
Perfect. So I guess the one question that I have for you is, I think this is great, by the way.
Thank you.
I think this opportunity for people to at least, get a glimpse into how African immigrants think and how they're doing and, just how they get the best of both cultures. I think it's good.
Thank you.
So you're doing a really good job.
Thank you.
Right? Like I told you, you're a pro at this. So.
Not at all.
Like
but I
you've been doing this for years, right?
No.
But I guess the one thing that I want to ask you is, for you, how does this translate to education for a 10-year-old on the streets of Lagos?
How does this, so the platform,
the Foshty idea.
Yeah, how does the Foshty idea translate to education for someone at home? I wouldn't say 10-year-olds because I don't think they would have access to the information. I would say maybe I'm targeting the college students or the grad students or the young professionals. This hopefully is a resource for information. So I'll use an example. This is the first season, it's my first time really recording in this space, and I've tried to find a diverse group of people who are doing different things or have gone through different experiences. Use you for example. You moved from Nigeria, you are here, you've worked with a major organization, but then decided to do something else and find a path that is now taking you back home, and you're coming back here, raising kids. There are two things. I think there are people in Nigeria at our home bases that really have no real context of what it's like to be on this side.
Right.
They have assumptions of what they think it's like or what it looks like, maybe based on Instagram pictures or something. But the true substance of what it takes to be successful here or to even be average here, some people don't have that context.
Right.
I hope that through some of the conversations, we didn't have enough time to dive into your education experience here or being in college and trying to figure college out, because that's a whole different conversation in its own. But we did kind of focus on your professional life and your business life, and that helps someone who has no context or no idea of certain things access to information. Even some people may be at home and not think about the lack of agriculture as a focus. Maybe that would excite something in someone else and think, you know what, I could do something about this. I could take a step towards this while I'm here versus, I need to go to America and become a doctor. Right, that gives a different perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Some other conversations I've had with people who maybe went to school in Nigeria or were born here and trying to manage their I had a conversation earlier with a young woman who had to deal with like infertility issues and stuff like that. We don't have those conversations. We don't. I am trying to use this platform as a way to make certain private or taboo topics public.
Okay.
So how does it help someone else? Gives them perspective. It makes them realize that they're not really alone in whatever they're working on, thinking about, processing. They're not alone. And at the end of it, when I'll ask that you share your contact information, someone could reach out to you.
Sure.
There could be someone in 10 years who goes to find Aquashoots
Yeah.
based on this conversation.
That's right.
And they're like, dude, I saw a thing with the co-founder of this and see how much the company has grown,
That's
right?
right.
On another scale, it could just be a nice conversation, and maybe someday I get to interview other people. I keep saying Barack Obama because technically he is an immigrant from an African
Of course
nation.
it is.
I know. Well, not come to my house, but you know what I mean. It's just it's this desire to have a different type of conversation.
Right.
Yeah, because we will talk about it in our offices, in our homes, within our group of friends, but no one else really puts it out there.
That's true.
And no one maybe cares enough to really hear our story. So maybe this is just for us. You know,
That's true.
this is my version of FUBU for us by us.
I
You know?
know.
But it is the idea that this is our story.
Perfect.
And that's what the Foshty platform is.
Excellent.
What we're supposed
Keep
to
up
do.
the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And on that note, thank you guys for joining us. Quick question, where
Sure.
can people find you or the company on social media?
All right, on social media, people can find the company. It's the Instagram handle is Aquashoots_Nigeria.
Okay, on Aquashoots_Nigeria. Okay.
Yeah, so that's on Instagram. They can also find me on social media, first and last name.
First and last
That's
name.
it.
Okay, full first name and full last
Full
name?
for well, not Muyiwa, it's Muyiwa.
Muyiwa
Olaosun.
Olaosun.
That's right.
Okay, all right. And guys, on that note, thank you again. I am Zaya Felix, and thanks for joining us today on Foshty. Bye.